It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I'm excited to introduce you today to Dr. Celina Nadelman. She's a board-certified pathologist with a unique practice. Her expertise is in fine needle aspiration, which is a biopsy done by a very fine needle. Yep, you figured that out. She has started her own practice, combining her background in internal medicine and her work in pathology. Dr. Celina Nadelman, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Ivy, for having me.
So I didn't want to read about all these wonderful and unusual things you've done because I'm fascinated every time I speak to you. I find myself leaning in. I will say very, very candidly, when our mutual connection has said, hey, do you want to meet Dr. Celina and possibly interview her for her success story? And I read your bio, I was like, I had a fine needle aspiration. And I was like, oh my God, I was so intrigued. And you've built a business that is unusual. So I'd love you to share a little bit about your practice and what you've done.
So my practice is unique because most people who need to go and get biopsies or fine needle aspiration biopsies usually go to a clinical practice like a surgeon or an endocrinologist for their thyroid or an ENT. And then they send the specimen, after they do the needle biopsy, they send that specimen to a laboratory. And then in the laboratory, it gets processed and a pathologist then reads it. So it's, you may have seen one person for the workup and then another person, maybe an endocrinologist or maybe a radiologist for the biopsy. And then the other person, the other doctor, is the laboratory person or the pathologist who actually makes the final diagnosis. And it's kind of like, it's not as streamlined and it runs the risk of kind of falling short of being precise or accurate, kind of like the game of operator. Sometimes things are like lost in translation. And
yeah, that's exactly what I was hearing when you were explaining. It was like, okay, so there's this person, then there's the middleman, then there's this, and then where does it go back to? And it's jumping. And I love the example of operation. And I use that a lot of how diluted messages get.
This is just how our, medical system is run. Most laboratory or pathologists, laboratory doctors do not see patients. They see patient parts. Or most famously, pathologists are known for forensics. You see them on NCIS. They're the ones who are doing the autopsies. But I did internal medicine to begin with in my, medical career, and then switched to pathology. So I'm not afraid, and I like to interact with my patients. And, I get to put my skill set for, like seeing the patients and getting a history and physical and actually seeing why they're there and being able to talk to the patients actually gives me information so that, in the back of my mind, when I'm looking at the actual specimen under the microscope, I can kind of connect the two. Oftentimes what happens is in the laboratory, we receive a piece of paper that says 34-year-old woman with a thyroid nodule, suspicious on ultrasound. We don't get very much history. And a lot of times we hardly get any kind of even like label or name as to the specimen itself. It's very sparse. So I get the chance when I see my patients, I'm able to ask them if it hurts or, if they have a family history of thyroid disease or thyroid cancer, if they have a history of, let's say, radiation exposure, people who were, around like Chernobyl, many years later, they got thyroid nodules and thyroid cancer. And these things are actually very, very important in helping me diagnose what is actually going on. When I was in medical school, they used to say, pathology does not work in a black box. But unfortunately, as pathologists, we are isolated from the rest of the, medical system, of the hustle and bustle. All we see is really the requisition form. And if you're lucky enough, you might have a connection to the hospital system and you can read up on maybe that patient's history or physical, but many times you don't have access to it or you don't have the time. So I feel very fortunate that I get to see the front end and I'm able to see the actual nodule and feel it, as well as I'm able to it's like a mystery and I get to solve the mystery. Like there are different clues that are left for me. And then I'm able to kind of put it together and make a cohesive, final diagnosis.
So I have to ask this. How did you come up with, okay, so I'm going to open a practice and eliminate, the middleman, basically. I'm going to actually do the aspirations and do the pathology. And did you see it modeled? How did this idea come? Because I remember you mentioned there's very, very few practices across this country who do this.
Yes, there's actually maybe a dozen private practice pathology run FNA clinics in the country. Like there's a famous person in Tennessee, there's someone in Brooklyn, there's someone in Florida. Well, when I was doing my first rotation in cytology, which is the study of cells, kind of like cells in space, part of that rotation in my residency was that we had to go into the clinic and do fine needle aspirations. Well, in medical school, I loved doing procedures. In fact, I excelled and got honors in surgery. Like they wanted to recruit me into surgery. So this kind of gave me a little bit of that. I was able to do a procedure and then I was able to make the diagnosis. And then in my second year, one of the doctors that came to speak at our residency program, he had a standalone fine needle aspiration clinic. And so when he was talking about it, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I want to do. I didn't even know that it existed. I had only thought that it existed kind of in like an academic sense, we were taught how to do it. And there are academic centers that actually perform fine needle aspirations, but like in private practice, I had never heard of it. So that's what I did. I was like, I found my calling. I think this is what I want to do. And I set up, actually, I asked him for his contact information and I set it up myself during my residency program to shadow him, to spend time.
So you started taking initiative early on when this clicked for you, when this clicked, you're like, the light bulb goes off and, you went right up to him and said, hey, I want to contact, I want to stay. And you saw that vision right then and there.
Yes. And in fact, since I did that, he now has regular fellows that come and rotate with him. I started.
It was never done before.
No, I was the first person. I was the one. I also went to someone who had an FNA clinic in a hospital, and it wasn't really a private practice. It was attached to the hospital, but she ran it similarly, and I spent time with her as well. So I sought out these different people as my mentors, like show me the ropes and how do we do this, as well as during my fellowship, I went to the radiology department and I said, I'd like to learn how to do ultrasound guided biopsies, because at that time, only radiology and maybe some endocrinologists were doing ultrasound guided biopsies. Endocrinologists were doing it of the thyroid and radiologists were doing it of other things. No pathologists were doing that. I carved out like a day a week and went down to radiology and sat there and looked at it and then went, because there were no courses for pathologists. Now there's a specific course for pathologists to learn ultrasound guided FNAs, but I had to find it out on my own. And in fact, because I wanted to be certified in a way, I had to pick a course that was outside of my specialty. I had to go with an endocrinology course and went to Texas to do it and get certified. So
you saw that the light went off, you saw the vision, and then you still have to finish your residency. There's so much. When did you actually start this practice, and how did you know? Because you mentioned before, and I'll be honest with you, our listeners, I'm not sure if we were recording at this point. We were just chatting because we chat. Starting a practice is starting a business.
Yes.
And there's so much we don't learn in our professional schools about running a business. How did you start figuring that component out?
Oh my God. I mean, I just wanted to open. It's been a process. And I've learned a lot along the way. They don't give you, my father and my brother were businessmen, but I didn't have anything to do with it. And I just said I wanted to do this, and I figured I would just, go door to door and, get a biller and do that kind of thing. But I quickly learned that there's a little bit more to businesses than just, providing a service, basically. Some of it, my mentor, the one that had come to my residency, he was very, very generous and open, and kind of showed me the ropes. He actually showed me his business plan. He's brilliant. He has an MBA. So he's had other businesses. He finished medical school at 22. He writes books on math and ultrasound physics. He's brilliant. But, first of all, his practice wasn't how I saw my practice. His demographic is completely different. My practice is in the Beverly Hills area. And I didn't quite understand what he was showing me. There's so many steps to it. It's not just a practice, it's also a laboratory. And there's all this laboratory, regulations that you have to fulfill as well. So in residency, we don't learn that much about regulatory bodies. We're supposed to know it and we get tested on it, but we don't have experience with it. So that was the first thing that I kind of learned. And then as time moved on, different things happened. I was just charging things on my credit card and racked up a bill. And then I had to owe, the government taxes, over $20,000 in taxes. I had no idea, and so I changed, I got a new accountant. Yeah. I kind of learned, I need, a loan, a line of credit, having a credit card with a high interest rate is not good for me, and so I took out a small business loan, all these different things, and different experiences actually, put into place new protocols.
Yeah.
So
it's fascinating. I've come to learn and realize there are so many areas in the professional space that so many of my clients are brilliant in their areas. They did not learn anything about business in their areas of brilliance, in that training and upbringing. And, I go into details about different accounts. It's and they look at me like, well, how do you make this stuff up? I'm like, I don't make it up. I ran a business this way for 30 years. I like an operating account. I like this, it's so often as you said, you're fortunate, your dad and your brother, were running businesses or were in business, but you also have to be willing to tap into those resources. And it's not always easy, especially in different types of business.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my father, by the time I went into business, I went into a partnership which failed. And I learned from that. She was, my mentor, and it just didn't work out. I was doing all the work, and I just wanted to be an employee. I wanted to be her salaried employee. And I didn't quite understand why she didn't have a head for business. And I was learning because she wanted to do things a certain way. And I said, wait a second, I'm going into business with someone. I have to do research on this. She wanted to do a general partnership. I'm like, well, do we do an LLC or, a corporation? Like, how do we do this? I had no idea. And then she would say, you open up a bank account under our business name. And when I went to the bank, they said, well, do you have paper, paper?
Do you have paperwork to back this
paperwork
up?
to go? And I said, no. So I had to go and find out what paperwork I needed, all the different, she had no idea about business. When she was in a partnership, it was told to her. And so she said, I know everything better. This is how it's done. And then, even setting up the bank accounts, how it was, she wanted to be paid a certain way. And I said, this just doesn't make sense. How would you be paid? It only has one tax ID number. It only goes to one bank account. She wanted it to be split. And I had to verify it. I had to go and ask people about like how it's done. So as it was developing, I learned along the way, how to open up, a business, how to, do all these things. I had no idea. And my brother was too busy to help me. He'd always say, oh, I'll help you. And then he would refer me to people that he knew. And they would say, oh, we'll sell you, a business plan for, $6,000. I'm like, I don't need a business plan. I have my mentor. He gave me a business plan for free. I need someone to kind of show me like the steps, 1, 2, 3.
How do you actually start implementing this?
Yes.
And what do you need to know to run it? And then
Yes.
how do you run it and have profits so we actually make a living?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I love the fact, and I want to talk a little bit about having the guts to take these actions. You're also you're a mom.
Yes.
We chatted. We both talked about our moms being part of the sandwich generation.
Yes.
which we are, and
Yes.
and life is life.
Yes.
It takes guts to take some of these actions.
Yes. In fact, when I first started, there was really no one doing what I was doing. I mean, so few people that when I would go to the pathology like meetings, they would be like, what do you do? Oh my God, boy, do you have balls? Boy, do you have guts? Like, are you crazy? Because most pathologists are, they just want a salary job. They just want a job. They just want to do their craft. They want a job. They're not, I wouldn't say they're not out of the box thinkers, because I think pathologists are kind of a creative bunch. They're visually creative. But it's so foreign. Like it's not part of a pathology practice. Pathology in laboratory is you usually work for in a group pathology practice that works for a hospital, or you work in a large lab like Quest or LabCorp. There are very few private practice pathologists, very few. And most of them are just innovators. That's just who they are. I fell in love with doing fine needle aspiration. And in most jobs, you have to do all the other stuff. And in fact, when my first job was at the VA, and I was an attending. I taught, students from USC medical, from their residency program. And I had to sign out all the other things. But the perk was that I was the cytopathologist, and I was the one who was doing fine needle aspirations. As long as I could do that, and I had that as a regular thing, I was happy. But, it didn't last that long. There are different things that went on. I wanted to carve out my professional life to be what I really found, interesting and exciting, and something that I, wake up every morning and say, I love doing what I do. I love what I do. I really do. The pits are the things that I don't like doing, which is running a business. Like, I am not a business. I did not get an MBA. I have to do it because it enables me to really do what I do.
Yeah.
I would love to pass that off on. And I tried, actually. I went to some people who are like investors, angel investment. I'm like, I will work for you. Can you just make my practice? I approached a couple of people, and my practice has gone up and down. Sometimes it's very, very lean. I don't make that much money. I mean, I don't make my mentor. He makes a lot of money. He works a gajillion hours. He has a staff of 3. I have a staff of 1, and I work part-time. I work part-time in my office, and I work part-time for the County of Los Angeles, doing exactly that. I do fine needle aspiration. But the management side is obviously taken care of by
Right.
the county.
And it's amazing because you've truly built something that works for you based
Yes.
on your values.
Yes. I wanted to be available for my children. I wanted to be able to go to their concerts and practices and award ceremonies. I wanted to be there and have that kind of flexibility to be able to do that. I mean, I'd say the majority of my friends, they work a long, hard 40-hour week. They're all professionals, and they cannot wait to retire. They're counting, when am I going to retire? And I'm like, I don't want to retire. I mean, everybody I've seen retire, they mentally start to go down. I'm not saying that I'm going to be doing fine needle aspirations until I'm 80, but it keeps me involved. And it makes me think of other things. And I kind of want to always have my hand in the till in some sort of way. I was asked to be part of the faculty at Charles Drew University. They're creating a brand new medical school. And so I am now going to be the co-directors of the pathology course curriculum for a new generation of medical students.
Right. I have to say, I agree with you. I have no desire, and I don't see retirement in my future, even with adult children at this point. Everything else is like, why? I'm having so much fun. I love what I'm doing. And I'm just adding in more playtime in my life, not taking away the things I enjoy as well.
Right.
And it's a fortunate thing with we're both, and I encourage all of our listeners, be in a field, be in whatever it is you're doing. Enjoy what you're doing, because we don't want to wait to retire to live. You want to live your entire life fully.
I totally agree. I see so many people who wait, oh, I'm going to travel and I'll wait until I retire. And then something happens and they get sick and they can't retire. They can't travel. They can't do the things. Or I have a friend who said, oh, I can't wait till I can retire because I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, why can't you do X, Y, Z now? Yeah, I think you need to be able to enjoy the things in your life. I mean, obviously, when you have small children, it's very hard to carve out time for yourself. And even now, I have children of all age ranges. my first and my last are 10 years apart. So they're all going through all different stages of life. But, and I know as a mother, as a working mother, you have to have your head on straight for your work, but you also, you want to devote your time to your children. And it's very hard to dedicate any me time, like there's very little time that you can kind of carve out for yourself. There's always something else that's going on. So I think that it's important to a little bit of
I think it is. And I think even with young children, as challenging it is, it might not be as much time, but you have to find the time. If not, if you implode, which is such a sad thing. And we probably all have crashed and burned in our times. But finding that balance, and I agree with you, and I look forward to being in this journey together for a long time as these women who are kind of breaking some rules of we're not retiring, we're having too much fun and just adding more joy to our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I mean, I'm artistic, and which is probably why I fell into pathology and really liked it, and it kind of gelled for me. And I don't have the time or the headspace to sit and paint or do I was a double major in undergrad in psychobio and in studio art, and I did painting and printmaking, and I can't really sit down and do that. But whenever my kids have a project, I'm like, okay, I'll help you. But I also find my creativity goes into my baking or my cooking, I kind of find other creative outlets. If I wake up early, then I have quiet time and everybody's asleep, and I can go and bake or do something that's on my own that I can kind of get happy, I like to go dancing, but of course at my age, my kids are like, oh, mom, you can't go to a club, but I get to go and do my little dance routines for exercise,
I'm definitely with you on that. And we should probably exchange some baking recipes at some point.
Sure.
Dr. Celina Nadelman, thank you so much for joining me here today on Her Success Story.
Thank you for having me.
And share with our audience how they could follow you, know a little bit more about you, and everything will be in the show notes, listeners. So don't panic about, well, I didn't get that spelling correct. It's all listed here.
So you can look me up on Instagram at Dr. Cancer Answer. Also, my website is www.drnadelman.com. That's DRNADELMAN.com. Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. And listeners, stay tuned as more wonderful episodes of Her Success Story are coming your way. Take a moment, hit subscribe, and think about, what did you take away from listening to our chat today with Dr. Celina Nadelman? What resonated with you? What actions you're going to do for yourself from listening today? Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next time.